On the night of April 3, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his final speech, declaring with profound conviction, "I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." Just one day later, he was gone, assassinated at the age of 39. Yet his vision of equality, justice, and nonviolent change endures as one of the most powerful forces in American history. Today, we explore the extraordinary life, legacy, and timeless message of this civil rights icon. Martin Luther King Jr. was born Michael King, Jr. on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, into a family deeply rooted in the Baptist Church and the African American community. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, was a former schoolteacher. The family lived in a middle-class neighborhood, but young Martin grew up witnessing the harsh realities of racial segregation. In the Jim Crow South, signs reading whites only and colored were everyday reminders of inequality. Despite this, his home was filled with love, faith, and education. King was a bright child who skipped grades in school, entering Morehouse College at just 15 years old. At Morehouse, an all-black men's college in Atlanta, King initially planned to study medicine or law, but influenced by his father and mentors like college president Benjamin Mays, he decided to follow a religious path. He graduated in 1948 with a degree in sociology and then attended Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he was elected class president and earned a divinity degree in 1951. It was here that King first encountered the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, whose philosophy of nonviolent resistance against British rule in India profoundly shaped him. King later earned a PhD in systematic theology from Boston University in 1955. During his time in Boston, he met Coretta Scott, a talented singer studying at the New England Conservatory of Music. They married in 1953 and went on to have 4 children, Yolanda, Martin 3, Dexter, and Bernice. In 1954, at age 25, King became pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. This move placed him at the heart of the growing civil rights struggle. The turning point came on December 1, 1955, when Rosa Parks, a black seamstress, refused to give up her bus seat to a white passenger, sparking the Montgomery bus boycott. African Americans, who made up the majority of bus riders, organized a 381-day boycott of the city's buses, walking miles to work or carpooling instead. King emerged as the leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association, advocating nonviolent protest despite threats and violence. His home was bombed, and he was arrested, but the boycott succeeded. In 1956, the Supreme Court ruled that bus segregation was unconstitutional. King's efforts continued with the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965, aimed at securing voting rights for African Americans. On Bloody Sunday, March 7th, state troopers attacked marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, again broadcasting images of brutality nationwide. The marchers, protected by federal troops after President Lyndon Johnson intervened, led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, banning discriminatory voting practices like literacy tests. In 1964, at age 35, King became the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, recognized for his nonviolent campaign against racial inequality. He donated the prize money to the civil rights movement, but King's vision expanded beyond race. In the mid-1960s, he turned attention to economic justice and poverty, launching the Poor People's Campaign to address issues affecting all poor Americans, regardless of color. He also spoke out against the Vietnam War, calling it a distraction from domestic poverty and criticizing U.S. involvement as immoral. This stance cost him support from some allies and the government, which surveilled him through the FBI's COINTELPRO program under J. Edgar Hoover, who viewed King as a threat. In early 1968, King traveled to Memphis to support striking black sanitation workers demanding better pay and conditions. They carried signs reading "I am a man," highlighting their fight for dignity. On April 3, amid threats on his life. King spoke at Mason Temple to a crowd of supporters. In I've Been to the Mountaintop, he reflected on history, urged economic boycotts, and prophetically addressed mortality. He recounted a near-fatal stabbing years earlier and said, if he could choose any era to live, it would be the present, amid the struggle for freedom. Then came his famous closing. He had been to the mountaintop, seen the promised land, a world of justice and equality, and, though he might not reach it with them, the people would. The next day, April 4th, 1968, as King stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel preparing to go to dinner, he was shot by a sniper. He died at age 39. The assassin, James Earl Ray, a white segregationist, was convicted. Though conspiracy theories persist, King's death sparked riots in over 100 cities. But Coretta Scott King urged nonviolence in his memory. President Johnson declared a national day of mourning, and millions attended his funeral in Atlanta. King's assassination was a tragedy, but his impact was profound. The Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act transformed America, dismantling legal segregation and expanding black voting. Posthumously, King received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977 and the Congressional Gold Medal in 2003. In 1983, President Reagan signed legislation creating Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a federal holiday observed on the third Monday in January. The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C., opened in 2011, featuring a 30-foot statue emerging from stone, symbolizing hope from struggle. This victory launched King into national prominence and proved the power of organized, peaceful resistance. Building on this momentum, King co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, in 1957, an organization of black churches dedicated to achieving civil rights through nonviolence. The SCLC coordinated protests across the South, training activists in Gandhi's methods and Christian principles of love and forgiveness. King drew from the Bible, particularly the teachings of Jesus on turning the other cheek, and from Thoreau's civil disobedience. He believed that unjust laws could be challenged morally without violence, stating that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. The 1960s saw King lead some of the most pivotal campaigns in the civil rights movement. In 1960, student sit-ins at segregated lunch counters inspired King to join protests in Atlanta, where he was arrested again. The Birmingham campaign in 1963 targeted one of the most segregated cities in America. King and the SCLC organized marches, boycotts, and sit-ins, facing brutal responses from police under Commissioner Bull Connor, who used fire hoses, dogs, and clubs on peaceful demonstrators, including children. Images of this violence shocked the nation and the world, pressuring President John F. Kennedy to support civil rights legislation. While jailed in Birmingham, King wrote his famous letter from Birmingham jail, defending nonviolent direct action and arguing that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He criticized moderate whites who urged patience, saying, "Wait almost always means never." That same year, on August 28, 1963, King helped organize the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. It was here that he delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. Standing before the crowd, King envisioned a future where his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He dreamed of an America where freedom and justice rang from every corner, drawing on the words of the Bible, the Declaration of Independence, and American patriotic songs. The speech galvanized support and contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed segregation in public places and employment discrimination.